Hey everyone, in today's video, I want to show you how to get Celery working in a Flask app that has multiple files. So basically, if you organize your Flask app in the recommended way, I want to show you how to use Celery with that. And the reason why I'm making this video is because I realized in previous videos, my Celery examples were too simple. So in this video, I want to make it a little more realistic so you can use it in your apps if you want to use Celery for anything. So before I get into the video, I just want to say that I do have a coaching program. So if you need one-on-one help with your project, you can go to prettyprinted.com/coaching or the link in the description below to learn more on how you can talk to me one-on-one and I can help you build your app or just answer any questions that you may have about building an app. So what we're going to do in today's video is convert this app that I have, which basically adds a user to the database. And it does it in a long running process kind of way. So it takes about 10 seconds to add the user to the database. I'm going to convert this app to something that uses Celery. So as soon as you go to add a user to the form and submit, it will immediately trigger Celery and Celery will run in the background and I'll have the options to cancel the task and everything. So Celery is going to handle actually putting the user in the database and then it's going to handle like the delay that I'll show you in a second. So first, let me show you the app that I have. So this is the app. It's pretty simple. So here I'm just going to put my name, add user, just go there, and you see it's kind of working. It's kind of hard to see, but it's working right now. It's kind of loading. It's waiting for something to happen. And I put a sleep of 10 seconds in there. That's why it's doing that. And now 10 seconds has passed and the page has completed. So now let me go over to my database. Let me open that up and just select star from user. And we see that I have one user, Anthony, in the database. So the way this works is I have this route as a form. Once the form is valid, it calls this function called add user, which I have in tasks.py. And this add user basically takes the form, puts the name from that form into the user model, instantiates that, passes it to the database, and saves it. And then it sleeps for 10 seconds. So the sleeping for 10 seconds is completely unnecessary, but the purpose is just to show you how you can use Celery for this. So when I have Celery working, you'll see that this is being called in Celery and your app won't have to wait for the 10 seconds to pass before it can continue working. So let me start here. I'll start by converting this function, which is just a plain function, to a function that can be used in Celery. So what I want to do is I want to import from Celery. I'll just put it at the top here. The first and most important thing that I want to import is something called shared task. So from Celery, import shared task. And the reason why I want this is because I won't be able to use the Celery object to decorate my function, to declare it as a Celery task. So in my other videos, I always decorate the functions with something from the Celery object, and that way I register my tasks on Celery. But in this case, I can't do that because of my project structure. So I have this dunder init, I have create app. In here, I'm going to instantiate the Celery object, but I have no way of getting that Celery object to this tasks.py. So share task will allow me to declare my tasks in a way that's independent from the rest of my app. And then when I do something a little bit later, you'll see how Celery kind of connects the two. So I have share task and I'll decorate this add user function. So share task. And what I want to do is I want to put bind equals true, just so I have access to self inside of the task, which I'll show you in just a moment. And I also want to make this an abortable task so I can use another route to kind of cancel this task midway through, just in case I wanted that ability. So I need to import something else. It's from celery.contrib.abortable, import abortable task. And I'm just going to take that and I'm going to put it as base. So if you're not concerned with aborting the task while it's running, then you don't need this. But for this video's purpose, I'm going to have that just to demonstrate how that works. So I have this task now. This is now a Celery task. It's no longer a plain function. So I have to change some things about it. So the first thing, I have this bind. So I need to put self as the first argument because that's what bind does. It passes self as the first argument without me having to do anything. The second thing I need to do is change this form. So right now, this is a form from Flask WTF or WT forms, but this won't work because I'm going to be passing the form from my Flask app to the Celery task. And you can think of them as completely separate. In fact, they can be running on two completely different servers. So I need to be able to get a Flask form over to this other server. And to do that, I need to pass it in a way that's something called JSON serializable. And that just means it's something that you can put in a JSON object and represent pretty easily. Now, form is an object, so I can't pass a form inside of a JSON object, but what I can pass instead is the form data. So I'll just change this to form data. And then when I instantiate the user here, instead of using form.name.data, I'm going to use form data and then name, right? So I just need to make sure I pass the form data from the form, which is pretty easy to do. And then inside of the task here, it's going to instantiate using that form data. Next, what I want to do is I want to check to see if the task has been aborted. That way I can just stop everything. So what I can do in here inside of the for loop, because this is where you would want to check for something like this, I can say if self.is_aborted, this method on self, and I can just say task stopped. Right, so what's going to happen is every iteration of this loop, which takes 1 second because of the sleep, it's going to check to see if the task has been aborted somewhere. If it has, then it's going to end immediately and just return task stop to the Celery command line. Okay, so the task is done. So let me go back to views because I need to update this to use the task. So it's still coming from the task directory. So now to change this, I need to pass the form data instead of the form. So I can just do form.data here, and that will pass the form data. And then I also want to call this using Celery. So instead of just calling the function, because that will work like before, I have to call it .delay on it. And then the data that I pass is exactly the same. Finally, what I want to do is I want to get the task ID. So I'll return whatever delay returns into a variable called task. And then what I'll do is I'll change this redirect in a moment to take the task ID and generate another page where I can potentially cancel the task. But for now, I'll just leave this like this. So now with the view done and a task done, now I want to actually bring in Celery. So what I can do is I can go over to my browser and I'm just going to open this link. So this is from the Flask documentation. And I'm just going to take this code here. So this is the code that they have for Celery. And my goal for this video was to take this code and not modify it at all. So there are ways you can get this working by modifying this code, but I thought it would be easiest if I can get everything working without modifying the code that comes from the documentation. So I'm just going to copy this, and then I'm going to put it into a file called utils. So of course you can name this whatever you want. I'm just going to call it utils, and I'll just paste it in there. So I just pasted it in. I'm not making any changes to it, and I could just close it because that's all I want to do. So now I'll go over to dunder.init, and I'll go ahead and import that. So from .utils, make Celery. And I want to update my configuration. So I have Docker Compose running and I have a Redis instance. So I'm going to use Redis as both the broker and the result backend if you're familiar with these things in Celery. So what I'll do is I'll just put this under my secret key. I'll say app config and then Celery_config. And that name comes from the utils. So Celery_config. That's what it's going to be looking for. And this needs to be a dictionary. So one key is going to be the broker URL. So broker URL. And in my case, I'm using Redis and Docker Compose. So Redis ://Redis. And then I'm going to use the same thing as the result backend. So result_backend. And then Redis ://Redis. Okay. So I have that. Now I want to use this make Celery that I copied from the Flask documentation. So since this is like an extension, I'll just put it right underneath my db init app. So what I'll do is I'll say Celery equals make_Celery, and then I'll pass in the app object. So it kind of works similar to db.init app, except that it's going to return its own thing here. And then the important part that I have to do here is I need to call Celery.setDefault. So what this is going to do is it's going to set this app, so the app that I'm declaring this in, as the default app. And then any task that it discovers inside of the tasks.py directory will be added to this app. So if I didn't have that, then they would kind of be independent. It would find this task, but it wouldn't associate it with the app that I'm going to run. So by calling Celery.setDefault, that's going to associate the two. So all those tasks are set on the default app, which is this one. So now what I need to do is I need to return Celery from here. So I'm going to return both app and Celery as a tuple. So just like that. And because I'm returning this here, I need to go into my run.py and I need to grab Celery from here. So app comma celery equals create app because I'm returning two things now. And the last thing I need to do here is I need to make sure that the application context is available because my Celery task will do something with the database. So you can't do this outside of the application context in Flask if you're familiar with that issue. So what I have to do here is I have to say app.app context dot push. And then what will happen here is when Celery picks this up, it's going to have the app context active. So inside of the task, it will be able to add stuff to the database. If I didn't have this here, when I would try to run the task, it will complain that it doesn't have an active application context. Like for one, it doesn't know where the database is because the database configuration is defined on the app. So by having the app context, Celery will now have access to all that information and it will be able to save stuff to the database. And then the last thing I need to do to get this running is I need to go over to Docker Compose. So right now I only have Redis and web, and the web is basically the same thing as Celery will be. So let me just create a new service called Celery, and I can just copy everything and I'll make the modifications that are necessary. So this needs to be indented just a little bit. Okay. And what I want to do is I want to change. Let's see. So Flask app is still run. Flask debug doesn't really make sense in the context of Celery. The volume is still going to be /app in the container. And the command is going to be a bit different. So the command is going to start Celery. So it's going to be Celery -a and then run. So my run.py .celery. And then I'll start one worker. And then I want my logs to work. So I'll put log level info so we can see everything working. And then the ports aren't necessary, but I do want to have depends on Redis. So I want Redis to start before Celery. And it's complaining about something. And I just need to de-indent some of these things here. So this will work well. And I think that's it. So let me go ahead and try. I will start up Docker Compose again. And here we see a task has been discovered. So project.tasks.add-user. And we'll see if everything is working. So if we go to views.py, we have the delay. And then, like I said, what I'll do is I'll come back and I'll add the task ID so we can cancel it. But first, let me make sure that this is working. So I'll go back to my app and I'll reload the create user page and I'll create Celery user. So add user. So it immediately returns. And now let's go back over to the terminal and we see it's counting up. So it's hitting that loop inside of the task where every second it just prints the second and then it says it's done. It succeeded in 10 seconds. Okay, so now let me add the ability to abort it. So instead of redirecting to create user here, I'm going to return a template. So this will be render template. And the name of the template here is cancel. So cancel.html. And I want to pass the task. And let me make sure it's the task and not the task ID. Yeah, so I want to pass the entire task to cancel. So I'll just save that. And now if I do this again, let's say Docker user, I'll add the user. And the problem here is some redirect is missing. So yeah, I need the actual cancel function. So let me go ahead and create that. So I'm going to call this cancel, and then it's going to take in the task ID. And I'll name the function cancel as well. And of course, it still takes in the task ID. So first I need to ask Celery for the task. So I can say add user .async results. And then I can pass in the task ID. So it will find the task that has this task ID that was initiated by add user. And then I just want to do task.abort and I can return canceled. Just like that. And now we can save it again. And I think if I do this now, last user, add user here. And now I see cancel task. It's counting up. I'll hit cancel. It says canceled here. And now I see here I have task stopped. And just to show you the database again, just to show you that I have those users. We have Celery user, Docker user, and Last user. So yeah, that's all I wanted to show you in this video. Not much of a tutorial, just more of you showing the process of how to get this working. The key ideas here, of course, are the shared task, the set default, where was it? The set default here. And then, of course, the pushing of the app context in your file run.py. So I hope this helped you if you were wondering how to get things running in a typical Flask project setup. And like I said, if you have any questions about this, you can always ask me for one-on-one help. If you have like a small question, you can leave it in the comments down below and I'll try to get to it. So that's it for this video. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please subscribe. So thank you for watching and I will talk to you next time.